We're on part 4 of the time tutorial. In this tutorial, I'm going to cover materials and textures. So let's switch over to solid mode. Z on the keyboard is a shortcut key. I'm going to hide the tool panel, that's T, and hide the properties panel, that's N. Now if you don't have shortcut keys, just click and drag these and they go away. Now materials is the way light interacts with the surface of the object. So if I switch this to rendering mode in the viewport, I don't see anything because I have no lights. So let's go back to solid. I'm going to hold down Shift A on the keyboard and go to lamp point. Now you can also go add lamp point as well, or go to the tool shelf. There's a couple places it's at. So I'm going to drag this up and near the top because I'm going to focus on this ring first. So maybe somewhere right about there. And let me select the ring over here. So let's go to rendering mode for the viewport. Now you can see that we're starting to see the elements, but let's play with the light properties. So let's go back to solid, click on the light, go back to rendering mode, and go to light parameters. Okay, so the first thing is the energy, that's how bright it is. The second thing is fall off. Now fall off deals with the light ray itself. So if I switch this from inverse square to constant, you can see the whole scene got brighter. And what it really did is just kept the energy level the same no matter where the light ray was from the light source. All right, too bright, so I'm going to go 0.7, and that's better. Now, of course, you can set these settings to anything you want. All right, let's keep going. Let's go back to solid, select the ring, and frame it, something like that. And let's open this up and select this tab here. That's the material tab. Now, to view materials, we need to have the viewport set to either rendering or material. Let's start with material. Let's click new and give this material a name. We'll call it metal _1 for metal 1. Okay. And the first section here is diffuse. That's the color. So if I switch this to something like that, you can see the color changed. Intensity is how much color is being applied. So if I drop this down, no color at all, bring it up, 100% color. The next section is shading mode. So if I want it to be shaded as a toon shader, you got toon option, Fresnel, and a couple others. I'm going to go back to Lambert. Okay, each one comes with its own settings, by the way. Then you have ramp options. This gives you the ability to apply multiple colors over across the surface at multiple different alpha channels. So you can see here, this is the color, this is the alpha. All right, and you can switch and select either one of these tags or add extra tags in the shot. But I'm not going to use ramp, so I'm going to uncheck that. Specular, same thing. You got color, intensity, shading mode. Top option is more like a metal, and hardness. So if I increase the hardness, it makes the highlight sharper, and decrease the hardness and it makes the highlight fall off. So I'm going to go back to, let's say, 50. I'm not going to go through shading, transparent, or any of these other tabs for right now. So we're going to focus on these two tabs and then adding textures. So material is the way light interacts with the surface of the object. Textures is actual images being placed on the surface. All right. So we're going to go to the texture tab. Now up here you can see we're on the handle, material 1, or sorry, metal 1. We're going to go new. Right now it wants me to grab an image or a movie clip. All I need to do is click open and I can go find a movie clip or an image. I'm going to cancel because I want to use procedural textures. Now if I click this right here, there's a whole list of procedural textures. Now procedural textures are images that are made by math equations. So instead of giving a bitmap image, it actually uses math to create various different images. So I'm going to start with, let's say, clouds. Okay, now to view it, I can view it as a texture on the material or both. All right, so I'm going to go back to, oh, this is good. So let's scroll down here. This is the cloud properties. I'm going to keep going. And here's the mapping option, so how it's being mapped on the surface. Now we're not seeing anything right now. Well, that's because we need to be in render mode to actually see textures being applied. All right. So let's change the mapping mode to, let's say, generated. And now you can see we're getting a cloud effect. All right, let's change the color down here. The influence section deals with what are you controlling with this texture. So right now I'm controlling in the diffuse, the color. I can control the color intensity and hardness in specular. I can control geometry options as well as some shading options. So for right now, let's just change the color. Something like that. Okay, so I definitely want to go for a degrading look. but right now it looks weird. I don't know, something just went wrong. All right, so let's keep playing. Let's jump over to the geometry section and click normal. Now normal applies a bump map. All right, so if you're familiar with other 3D programs, normal is the normal map and the bump map combined into one. So it can read black and white images as well as the multicolored normal images. Now, if you're unfamiliar with bump maps, bump map basically takes a black and white image and sets the black as low and the white as high. So it creates this, I don't know, this is like skin cancer disease look. So let's continue. Let's increase the amount to 4 and you can see it becomes more extreme. All right, and same thing with the diffuse. If I increase the color amount, it becomes more extreme, or decrease it, it becomes less extreme. So let's go ahead and minimize the mapping tab for right now. Scroll up. So let's play with the cloud settings. So let's switch it to a size of 5. All right, now we're getting almost like a guts look. Let's switch the depth. Before we do that, actually, let's change the bases. All right, so we're on Blender Original. My suggestion is you click through these to see which one each does, but I know I'm going to use Veroni 4. Or sorry, F4. So now that gives me some smooth areas and some degraded areas, but these degraded areas look like wrinkled paper. So let's increase the depth to, let's say, 5. And now they look more degraded, but it's still not extreme enough. So let's click hard. There we go. Now we're getting some nice degraded areas with some nice smooth areas. So to control this, let me minimize cloud section, go to colors. I'm going to use brightness and contrast to control the smooth areas and the rough areas. All right. So let's take the brightness up to, let's say, 3. And you can see here it smoothed it out. So that means more brightness means more smoothed areas. So let me decrease it to, let's say, 0.5. Now I have all rough areas and no smooth areas. Let's try playing with contrast. Let's go 3. So increasing contrast increases smooth areas and limits where the rough areas are going to be. So that's pretty cool. Let's take the contrast down to 1.5. All right, and let's take the brightness up to, let's say, 0.8. And that's more of what I'm looking for, some nice smooth areas and some degraded areas. And all we're controlling right now is the color and the normal map, which is the bump map. So that's pretty cool. Let's see, anything else? Yes, let's control specular. So we'll come down here and check specular intensity and color. And you can see here, now I'm controlling the specular area. I'm actually going to jump back to the material and decrease the intensity here. So that way the texture itself is controlling it. Now, I'm getting some specular highlights in the areas that I really don't want them, like in here. So what I'm going to do is come back up here. Actually, I'm going to uncheck specular and color. So I'm not going to have this material control that. So let's go ahead and name this. This is going to be called metal _1. Actually, let's go metal color bump 1, because we're controlling the color and the bump with this texture. Or see, that looks good. So let's go ahead and create a new texture, but I'm going to duplicate the first one. To do so, I'm going to click here and click metal color bump 1. All right, now this is an exact copy, so that means if I change it, it will change the original. The only thing it doesn't hold is the mapping coordinates and the color influence down here. So we need to change this to where if I change its settings, it's not going to affect the original texture. To do so, I'm going to hit the plus sign, and it creates a new name. So let's go ahead and rename this to metal spec or specular. All right. And I'm going to scroll down, change the mapping to generated, and uncheck diffuse, whoops, and check color intensity and color, sorry, for specular. And let's change the color to kind of a yellowish tone. That's better. And if I decrease the value, you can see it decreases how bright it is. So that's pretty cool. We've got intensity. Of course, I can decrease these values to decrease how much it's affecting the shot. And if I hit negative here, it's going to flip what it's affecting. All right. So let's go ahead and uncheck that. And let's scroll back up to the top. let's play with the brightness setting, 2.2. Let's see what that does. There we go. So now it's pulling out of the rough areas and only being on the smooth areas. That's definitely what I want. So that's pretty cool. So now we've controlled the specular. Maybe I want to add a little bit more roughness to the smooth areas. So let's create another texture. Click on a blank slot. Click here. And I'm going to copy the metal bump one. And let's change the name again. Hit the plus sign. Let's change this to color bump add _1. So we're adding some extra color and bump. So again, let's switch the mapping to generated. And we're going to change, let's see here, the color to a very dark color. Somewhere in there maybe. And then let's play with the actual settings for the clouds. Let's go Blender Original. And maybe decrease the size to 1. And there you go. Now it's being applied to these areas. Let's add some bump. But it's going the wrong way, so let's go negative 0.5. That's better. So that broke up the smooth areas. And that looks much nicer. In fact, it's probably a little too small, so let's try size of 2, just see what that does. Yeah, that's better. Let me go brightness of 0.9. Yeah, okay, so I'm liking where that's going. And let's create another material to add some extra rust in these areas. So I'm going to click here, duplicate color bump, hit the plus sign to make it its own texture. And let's name this color, actually metal rust _1. And let's, of course, change the mapping mode to generated. And I'm actually going to switch the mode down here to negative. So it forces the color into the cracked areas. And let's change the color to like an orange red. Let's play with the mix mode. Maybe switch this to color. And that's better. Let's decrease the influence a little bit. Let's bring this back down to, let's say, 0.8. All right, so that's looking good. Let me scroll back up to the top. And if you notice, if I change, let's say, I'm going to decrease the brightness a little bit, maybe 0.7. Actually, wrong way. Let's go 0.95. So that's going to really target certain areas. It's too much. Let's go 0.9. All right, so you can uncheck it just to see the influence that it had. There we go. And recheck it. So that's looking good. Okay, so what happens if you want to apply, you like this so much you want to apply it to a different object. So let's go back to solid, select a different object, and go to the material section, click right here, metal 1. And if I go back to rendering, you can see now it's applied. So that's pretty cool. But what happens if you want to copy it, but you want to change the settings to make it its own material? So let's go back to solid. Let's click the next piece down. And let's go to the material options, click metal 1. But we want to make it its own material, so I'm going to hit the plus sign and call this metal 2. All right, I'm going to do that to all these pieces in here as well. So plus sign 2, plus sign 2, plus sign 2, and plus sign 2. Okay. So now if I change settings, it won't affect my original one. In fact, you can see here, this one should be named Spec 1. None of these names have changed. So let me go back to this piece and let me hide the actual pieces we're done with and focus on this. So let's go back to rendering. Okay, so I'm going to uncheck each one of these for right now and focus on the metal bump 2. And we're going to scroll down. And this time I'm going to change the mapping mode to, let's say, object. And you can see here it already changed the way it looks. Let me go ahead and select the object by hitting the eyedropper and clicking on the object. Now that doesn't always work all the time, so you have to click on the actual box and then go find it. Or type in the name if you know it. Okay, so crossbar, that's looking good. Maybe play with the scale a little bit. Let's go 3. There we go, that's even better. All right, so now we need to match these settings with some of the other pieces that we've done. So let me minimize preview. Minimize color for now because I didn't play with any of the color. I just played with the mapping and the size. So let's go to metal color bump. Nope, that's going to be something different. Let's go to the metal spec. So the size on this one is going to be, let's see what it does. 3. Let's come back to here, 3. And of course we want object. And let's select the object. Let me turn it back on, by the way. There we go. Looking good. So let me go down to rest, turn it on. Same thing. We need to change the size to 3. And the coordinates to object. Select the object. There we go. Looks good. Probably on this one, though, I want to bring this to 0.8. Yeah, that's better. Okay, so now I have the last color, which is metal color bump 2. So this is, let's turn it on. Let's play with the mapping mode. Object, select the object. And that's not looking too bad. Let's just play changing the size to maybe 1. Nope. Let's go 3. That's a bit better. Okay. So that's how you create a new material, or sorry, not a new material, but a copy material that has its own settings. Let me go back to solid. Let's save this now because we're going to work on this outer ring. In fact, actually, before I save it, let me reposition the light to the center. Select this piece and hide it. And now let's go File, Save As, and let's save it as time 2, just so we don't mess with the original. And click Save as Blender File. All right. Let's create the material for the outer ring now. So let's select it and go to Material Options and go here, and I'm going to choose Metal 1. All right. I'm going to hit the plus sign and convert this to Metal 3. And I'll do that to everything in here as well. Plus sign, 3, plus sign, 3, plus sign, 3, plus sign, come on, 3. Okay. So I want to map this differently. I want to actually have it stretch across the surface instead of being a worn look. So let's go back. I'm going to hide all these others. Start with the first one. Go to rendering mode. All right. And let's go into the generated option. Let's switch it to object. Now the reason why I'm changing it to object is because eventually we're going to break this apart. And I want the texture to be able to still flow from piece to piece to piece and be consistent. So we're going to switch to object and we're going to choose front. Okay. And let's stretch it. So I'm going to come into the Z axis and do 25. And now it looks like it's got scratches. And let me try decreasing the X axis to, let's say, 0.4, maybe even the Y axis to 0.4. All right, so let's play with a few settings in the colors and the size. First, let's try increasing the brightness, so let's say 1. And that's better. It's fewer scratches where I want it to be. And maybe the contrast to 1.7. Yeah, there we go. Kind of like that. All right, and let's just play with size. Let's go 10, see what it looks like. No, but maybe 7. Yeah, kind of like that. So you can keep playing with the settings all you want, and you can even shift the texture around by dialing with the offset. I think that's pretty good for right now. So we need to copy these settings over. Let's get out of solid mode, or out of render mode, into solid mode. So the specular is going to maintain a lot of the same settings. So let me check it. And starting off 1.7. 1.7. And this is actually probably going to be 0.95. Okay. And what else? Size is 7. And we want to switch the object, face, and this was 0.4, 0.4, and what was it, 25? Oops, it's not face, it's front. There we go. Almost made a mistake. So let's do that to the rust as well. It's going to maintain the same settings. So 1 and 1.7. And then it was 7. Object, front, 25, 0.4, 0.4. Okay, so just to check it, let's go to rendering mode. Looks good. And let's play with the actual final color. All right, so first things first, let's adjust its options to object, front. Size is way too small, so let's bring this to, let's say, 10. That's better. A little too extreme for my taste, so let's go ahead, maybe even bring it up a little bit more to see what it does. Try brightness of 0.8. There we go. And like I said, I am going to decrease how much color is being applied by hitting negative. Let me think about this. Let's go, not negative, sorry. Let's go 0.5. That's a little too low, so let's go 0.8. All right, so that works. And like I said, this gives you a different look than what was on the other pieces, more of a scratch look. So now you're learning how to control the textures via sizing. And I think that's pretty much it for this piece. So let's go ahead, go back to solid and hit H on the keyboard. Now this front piece here, my suggestion is go online. I like this very worn look here. So maybe I can mimic that. So let's select it, go to the material panel, click new. I'm gonna call this face metal. Okay, and maybe bring down the white a little bit because it's old. Specular I'm going to bring down for right now. And let me jump over to the texture pattern. New, clouds. Let's go to object. This is going to be face. Switch to rendering. Okay, and let's try a size of 20. Let's change the color. Do something like that. Okay, let me go back to here. Maybe even drop the color a little bit more. This has been around for a while. The white's pretty much gone. And of course I can play with depth. Let's say 5. A little more smoke out of it. And I can choose, let's say Veroni 4. 1.5. Yeah, see now it's getting the opposite of what I want. Let me try flipping this to negative. No. So let's go 0.5. There we go. All right, and of course I can actually come through and change that this one could be darker and this one can be lighter. And then I can actually maybe bring this to 1.5, 0.8. So now I have some soft areas, and then the dark areas are the less of the two evils, the lesser. In fact, let me bring this down even more. Let me increase the amount of color being applied. Let's go 0.5, see what that does. There we go. Okay. And maybe have it control specular. Let's decrease the intensity. Something like that. Let's go 0.4. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and call it a day for this piece. So I'm going to jump back over to solid and hit H. All right, so that's pretty much going to be the same thing over and over again for each one of these pieces, except for these that need multiple materials. So let me show you how to do that. We haven't done that yet. So let me go to the material option, click new, and let me call this brass _1. All right. And let me just change the color a little bit to more of a brass tone. Maybe even change it to, not MinArt. Let me do, yeah, something like that. Okay, so that's my first material. I'm going to go into edit mode by hitting tab, or you're going to come down here and click edit mode. And I'm going to go to polygon mode. All right. And we're going to use C on the keyboard, or let me hit exit. You're going to go select, circle select. All right. So it's the same thing. You're going to select all these polygons. It's going to get a different material. Oops. There we go. I'm going to escape to end that selection. I'm going to hit the plus sign, and with this empty material slot, I'm going to go new, call this jade _1 for jade 1. And we're going to change the color and hit assign. So it applies it to that selection area. Now when I hit tab, come out of it, you can see I have two materials now being applied to the one object. So it's very important that you click the assign button to whatever you have selected so it applies the second material. So that's pretty much it. Now you can go through, if you go online, you can actually research different types of materials for Blender and their codes. So to find this site, I would type in Blender metal material wiki. And it's either the first or second link, and you can see here's all the options. So there's a brass option, and you can see the colors that they're using for it, the shader. There is copper option. Now some of these settings aren't going to match to the new Blender because these are for older Blenders. For example, the mapping method right here, ORCO, is now UV mapping. So you have to UV map your object before you apply it, and you'll use UV mapping instead of ORCO. All right, there's a couple other things, but I think that's the primary one that's different. And of course, you can always go online and just look up materials. So like old brass gets almost a green tint to it. So when I'm building this, I can go to my textures and go make sure I'm on the brass one. Yep, brass, and let's go new. Let's go clouds. Let's choose object. Now this gear is, I think, G2002. G2002. And let me go into uncheck color. Well, actually, no, I'm going to need color. Tap in the green. It's going to be a dark green. Just check. Yeah. Something like that. Let me go into rendering mode real quick. And let's play with the type. Veronia 4. size of 5, contrast 1.5, brightness 0.8. Let's decrease the size to maybe 3, and maybe hit hard. There we go. Maybe even bring up the contrast to 2. Let's add some bump. I'm going to go negative because I want the green to be on the inside. Depth, let's go 5. Bump, it's too much, so I'm going to go 0.5. It's better. And maybe bring the brightness up to 0.9. Actually, I'm going to go in the other direction. 0.6. To bring a little bit more green into the shot. Contrast, I'll do 2.3. I'm just making up numbers, to be honest. Makes it sound like I know what I'm doing, but I don't. All right, so that's looking all right. I would keep playing with it, of course. I don't think it's quite there yet. I think actually the erosion is a little too powerful. Yeah, that's better. And maybe sample the green in a little bit more. There we go. And let me scroll all the way down. If I don't like the way the green is mapping onto it or looks on it, let's change the mix mode. Let's try color. Hue. Definitely not. Let's try multiply. That's better. But I lose the green. What about subtract? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. That's better. Darken works. Yeah, I think either I'll stick with mix. Or I'll do darken. Maybe pull down the color just a bit. Okay. And you'd keep going. Now, actually, there's one more thing I want to apply, because this brass is very reflective, which is very blurry reflective. So let's add mirror. Let's open it up. Reflectivity, I'm going to go maybe 0.3. And let me decrease the glass amount. That's going to give it a little bit of blur. Let's go 0.8. You can see what it happens. These settings that we change happen in here. In fact, actually, let me come out of rendering mode. Go back to solid. And maybe increase the roughness a bit. Reflectivity 0.2. There we go. Of course, I can keep playing with different shading modes if I'm not liking what I'm getting. It's too extreme. Yeah, let's switch it back to... Yeah. All right, so let me come out of the rendering mode again. All right, so that's what you're going to do. You're going to go through and place textures onto your scene. Make sure you use Google. Try to get some maybe advice from other people when they're playing with their settings. And of course, always look up what you're trying to create to mimic it. So I'm going to stop here and then go through and texture the whole thing and come back and show you what I did. And then we'll go on to part 5. Okay, I'm finished texturing everything and materializing everything. So just as an example, let's go into render mode. And oops, I missed a piece. So I'm not finished. Let me click it. Let me do metal 2 on it. Yep, that works. Okay, so now I'm done. let's just go through and hide some things. Let me go back to solid real quick. Okay, so for these pieces, basically I copied over the material 3, created a material 4, and I changed the material color bump to 4 and changed the color to more of a blue tone. And I'll probably even play with later adjusting the brightness contrast, because I don't really like the way it's mapping. Might even change the mapping mode actually to see if that gives me better results, but that's basically what I did with those parts. I kept playing around with the brass material for these parts. You go ahead and go back to solid. Let's see, these pieces, they're a good one to go to. Okay, so you can see here they got this like ring pattern as well as the rusting look. What I did was under the material, just played with a little bit of diffuse. I don't have the intensity all the way up. Using the specular as the metal option. Jumped over to the texture option, created a ring, steel ring, and I'm using wood. And I set the wood to saw and ring. Okay, to create that ring. And then the second one is just a normal steel bump using the clouds and object as its mapping coordinates. Let's see here, mapping, influence. Somehow my categories got all switched around. Let me come out of rendering mode real quick. Alright, so this is supposed to be white. Clouds, it's supposed to be up. Right about there. Okay, so you can rearrange your panels just like that. But as you can see, I use the Veroni 4 hard. Nothing new. There's nothing new about the rust section. It's just that the new thing is the steel using the wood and saw and ring. All right. I think that's pretty much it. I don't think there's really anything else in here. Just a black material on these with a bump, a texture, cloud texture as a bump, and controlling specular. That's about it. So nothing different for any of those pieces. Like I said, I might still play around with these to get a final look, but I think that's pretty much it. So let me hit Shift H, oops, sorry, Alt H to unhide all. And again, that's under Object, Show Hide, Show Hidden right there. All right. Oh, there's one more piece I forgot. So let me grab that, material. Let me go Meta 1. And let me just go back to rendering. So go ahead and join me for part 5 if you want to learn how to unwrap these pieces and texture them in another program like Photoshop or GIMP. I'm not going to use GIMP, I'm going to be using Photoshop. If you don't have any desire to unwrap it and you're happy with the way your material looks, then go ahead and jump to part 6, okay? So I'll see you in either part 5 or part 6.